window for that thing was between 6 and 9. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be 9. I know how this works. And so we were trying to hold the paper to be able to get that in. And it's like, well, is it going to be at a reasonable time? No, it's not. They didn't even have a firm time until after 7 or 8, I want to say. They didn't even know what time it was going to happen. So it's Mike had already written for that day. He was kind of off. And then it was, oh yeah, this other thing is coming up now. So he's off, and he's having to jump back in and put the cape back on once again to get this gore stuff. That's just the nature of this. That's what people don't always understand about it, is that even when you think you're off, you are not off. And I told you guys the Blake Griffin trade day, I had written and I had just sent something else in about them trading for somebody else. I don't even remember who. I said, yeah, they should trade for this guy. And then the Blake news comes in. It's like, well, that's a little bit better than that. Delete.
By the way, it had to be, and I don't know, I'm not an expert on this, but Friday night, come on, Friday night.
It's the Friday night news dump. It is the Friday night news
That's
dump.
what it was,
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
It's very much, well, it could have been worse. It could have been a Saturday night news dump, which is just insane. But true. Friday is, let's try to hold the paper. Never mind. It's not, we can't do it. He's not going to start talking until 9 o'clock, and he's not going to finish until 9:45. All of our deadlines are blown.
Oh man, bro, this is awesome. You know, let me get this started, yo. What up, though, people? It's your boy Brandon Dent, aka Detroit Kool-Aid. Got this smile on my face because I am rocking out on the Woodward Pistons podcast via the Woodward Sports Network with Hollywood himself, Mr. Jeff Iafrate. And we got the legend here. You guys already know we got to get this drum roll going for the legend. Hey, yo, shout out to the legend Detroit News, Rod Beard. Man, how are you gentlemen doing this morning?
Hey, we got real Jeff, or hologram Jeff, if you will. We don't even have where is Water Bottle Jeff? Water Bottle Jeff is so jealous right now. He's like,
I had to tuck him away today, man.
Where's my
I can't even look at Jeff.
I demand equal time. Water Bottle Jeff has been the secondary star of this show for so long.
Yeah, I can confirm this is not a hologram. I am here. I'm happy to be here. Nope, yep, it's real. I was not paid to be here. No checks. I did not land in my private jet outside the vicinity. I am here, and I'm excited. It's been a while since I've been able to talk to Rod. I mean, me and Kool-Aid, we talk all the time, but you guys are crushing it, man. I still watch all the pods, but I'm just happy to be in the presence of a legend. See, I'm flipping it on you, Rod. I'm flipping it back on you. You're a legend.
Yeah, as the private jet was refueled in Toronto on the way here.
Right. Listen, I told Jeff, man, and obviously he's been paying attention to. We start this thing off with Rod's thoughts. Yeah. Brother, take it away.
Man.
He already started with a man.
Yeah. So I'm watching this game last night.
Oh.
And I here's how I handle Piston stuff now. I don't get emotionally invested, and I don't start watching at the beginning. I need to see the first quarter to see if it's a wise investment of time. So I see that they're up 14, and I'm just, okay, well, maybe. Okay, I will invest. I will push the chips in the middle of the table and watch this thing. That lead evaporated. That thing evaporated. My son was like, hey, Dad, there's a chance. They're up 14. Okay, and as by the time I got settled in, 6-4, done. Down 2. Man. Like, what is this? Now, full honesty. Fourth quarter, I think it was about 8 minutes left. Pistons are up 5. I really grabbed a device to say, how am I going to put start writing on this for a win? I really did. I really thought they were going to win. But as I've done throughout this streak, I said, you go up 5. You need a stop and a score. If they get a stop and a score, I will go start writing. Right when they went up 5. stop and score. You give me a stop and a couple of free throws, or a stop and a make, or hit a three, and you go up 8 in that instance.
Yeah,
I will risk start writing, because this feels real. And what happens every time you get into it's the thing with this team is it's not so much they can't get stops is the number one thing. When they need to get a stop, they will not get it. But it's also when they need a bucket to stay within reach, or to go ahead and really just start to put put your foot on somebody's neck, they will not get a score. You can guarantee they will take an ill-advised shot when they need to do something. And it's really, there have been so many instances of they're down 3 or they're down 5 or whatever it is, and they come down and shoot a 3. You don't need a 3. You need an easy 2. They just, their shot selection in the heat of the moment and when the game is on the line is horrific. It's horrific. And if it's not the shot selection itself, it is the worst turnover. The worst. It's just, and this is what we say when we say they need a veteran and they need somebody to calm things down. That vet is Cade now. That's the dude that really brought them back, put them in a position to win. But and we can dig into this more, but my thought was, I'm ready to go start writing if they get a stop and a bucket. And did they get either? No. That 5-point lead, just like the 14-point lead, vaporized within a minute or so. And that's the hallmark of this streak and of this team, is they do not have the ability to have a strong possession when they need it, a game-changing possession when they need it.
And to Rod's point, I mean, I think that's a bar where Rod just said the vet on this team is Cade, technically in his second year. He had 37 in the second half?
Yep.
Who does that,
bro?
Who does that?
And I saw him doing some moves, man, that I haven't really seen him do since his rookie season. He was hitting the in and outs with just ease, man. And then he had one crossover, bro, like the quick, like kind of Tim Harder, doot, and got in for the layup. And I think it was an and one on that play. It was a masterclass. And for me personally, I've wanted to see him be a little bit more selfish. You know, we talked about the fact that he starts the game off looking for his teammates, looking to make sure that they can feel included. And hearing some of his comments after the game, that's just the type of guy he is. He's the type of leader that wants to not only lead by example, but he wants to make sure that his guys are with him too. And I respect that out of him. But with this current iteration of the Pistons, especially having a little bit of help back with Bojan, Jaden Ivey's kind of hit a little bit of a better stride. I think it's time for him, honestly, to just step up and from the start of these games, just be that guy. Like, seriously, I feel like he has that talent. I know there's been people out there who've kind of questioned if he's that guy, if he's one of those types that can kind of elevate or lift the team. And, you know, the 2 wins, the streak and all of that, I don't believe that all of that is just due to what this team is, but more some of it being to what this team is going through right now. Like Monty talked about it last night. Cade talked about it last night. Yeah, they're pressing. This thing is weighing on them. They think about it all the time. And as they get to the end of these games, some of these games where they've had an opportunity to win, you could see them kind of pressing and certain mistakes come out that just weren't there like the previous maybe 8 minutes in the game. When they took that lead, it looked like I was with you, bro. I was in the arena. I was just like, yo, they might do this. But you're right. I wanted to see them kind of get that one more stop. And it just seemed like they were pressing. They were kind of scrambling. The Nets came down, ran a couple pick and rolls, got their shooters open in the corner. And I could tell as soon as it was one play where Cam Johnson hit a 3 on one wing, and I forget who it was that hit the 3 on the other wing, kind of like right after. And it was just like backbreaking. And you could see kind of their spirits take a little bit of a dive, man. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out. And that's where I'm hoping Cade can kind of be an equalizer of sorts as he starts to realize it's going to take a lot more of what he could bring to the table to really bust this slump.
So, but to your point, in the first quarter, when they were out running, I think some of that is Cade facilitating, and he has to be thinking at that point, all right, this is exactly what we need is everybody. Boyan's starting to score. Everybody's getting involved. We're out in transition. We're playing some decent defense. And you know what? We're not turning the ball over like crazy. This is the blueprint of what it should be like.
Right.
Yeah.
But can you do that in the third and fourth quarters? And that's been the issue. You have and this time it was a second quarter. You got a 23-point second quarter. 23 and your other quarters are 31, 31, 27 in the fourth. That's all winnable stuff. But that 23, it kills you. And you can't have that margin of error if you're a team that makes so many mistakes. 13 turnovers, you should be in that game. And Cade decided in the second half that he didn't want them to lose that game. But who was really with him in that second half? Who was like, okay, bro. And Brandon, you know this. Anytime you go and you play pickup ball somewhere, when it's point, your style changes completely. You're not just out there running and just say, run ISO with that dude and everybody's going to clear out. You don't take the first available shot because you know you only need one. And that's what I want to see when the possessions have to be crucial and important down the stretch of a game. And I don't get that sense because of who's handling the ball in those situations and the heinous turnovers that you see in those situations. But then, and some of that may be the coaching and the play call and what you have in that, but that has to be a team mentality where you say, look, put the ball in Two's hands and let Two set something up for us. I didn't see bad Cade possessions going down the stretch, but I saw a lot of other people. You can't have that. When you need a bucket, the ball has to go to your guy's hands. Every other team does it. Every team does it. And in that second half, I didn't see somebody else that raised their hand and said, Cade is there. Let's go get on Cade's back. I'm going to do my part to make this happen. I didn't see that.
Yeah. And it's something because, the losing streak is always going to kind of cloud anything positive that happens. And I get it because how much can you really take out of a loss? But it's like I saw some positive things, some positive trends from this squad that leads me to believe that they will have an opportunity. I don't think it's going to be this year. I think it's going to come in the new year to kind of break this streak and try and start something a little bit different than what we've seen over the last 27 losses in a row, man. Like I was encouraged. I thought that Jaden Ivey provided some of what we thought he could provide for Cade Cunningham when he was drafted, kind of that secondary scorer, that secondary ball handler. And he found Cade, honestly, on a couple, like when Cade started to get going, it was off of a couple Jaden Ivey facilitated plays. One where Jaden Ivey drove, he was on the left side. He kind of crossed over right to left, drove in. I thought he was about to get kind of caught up in the air, but the whole time it seemed as if he knew Cade's going to be open behind the arc. And I believe that was Cade's first three of the game was off of a Jaden Ivey pass. And there was a couple other plays as well. One thing I really like is in transition where Jaden Ivey definitely knows how to run and fill his lane. These to me are positive trends. I don't know how much starting, coming off the bench to start the season affected Jaden Ivey. I've kind of heard some things that it might have really kind of had him down, even though he was trying to fight through it and keep a positive attitude. Bojan Bogdanovic, he's scoring much better alongside K and in these lineups. It seems like they're starting to find ways to get these guys all their shots and get them involved. But like you said, man, leading down the stretch is where it's like, okay, Jaden Ivey, Bojan Bogdanovic, you already know what the deal is. Get the ball to Cade Cunningham. Find a way to kind of be that release if he needs it, but get the ball to Cade. And it was crazy though, man. Like we talked about this morning on Morning Woodward Show. It got to the point though in that fourth quarter where every pick and roll, the Nets were sending help on Cade Cunningham. And they always had a center or a big man kind of shadowing it as well. So they would do the 1-5 pick and roll. Well, the 4 from the Nets was just sitting there right in the paint waiting for Cade to come over. And it was a couple plays where he had to take the double pick and roll, come off and then come off again, and then he had it in the mid-range. It's tough, man. I mean, to put up 37 points against that type of defense was just like, That's insane to me, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. But I wanted to be able to get into some conversation. Obviously, we know Gore spoke. He believes that the organization has what it needs, and we've talked about this too. And it is a fact. They have what they need to be able to go and make some positive change for this team. But the area in question is if Troy Weaver is capable and if the front office in totality is something that's going to be able to facilitate what needs to happen next for this team to take a step forward. We've heard what Isaiah Stewart rumors. We see that there's some teams that are interested in him, but we've talked about this, Rod, and I'm going to just be able to get Jeff's kind of his answers on the books as well. Do you guys trust in Troy? Oh my gosh. We got Gentry over here, our resident Red Wings beat writer holding up sell
How
the
does
team.
a Red Wings beat writer write a sign to us that says sell the team? What is this?
And then smiles at us.
But continue what we're saying, Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the Troy Weaver of it all.
Yeah.
Before the season started, about 7 days before free agency, you guys have heard me say this before. He said that there was going to be no big splashes that were going to come last off season, and that they were going to assess the team to see exactly what was needed to dress around whatever young players that were going to be here for the long haul. To me, that spelled by the trade deadline, by the draft, and by next free agency. And I've kind of always been locked into that. Now, I know that a lot of our viewers, a lot of other fans out there, they don't really care about that. They wanted to see stark improvement this season.
Mm-hmm.
They dealt with Cade missing a year last year. They've dealt with 15 years of losing, and I 100 or of mediocre basketball to losing. And I understand that fully.
Right.
I've always kind of, Rod, we've kind of looked at this thing from the standpoint of how they signed their contracts with Bagley and Bojan, and we knew this summer coming up was kind of their window to really get in and make something happen. But Jeff, I wanted to ask you, man, with Troy Weaver, where are you at in terms of him being able to kind of push this button on this rebuild and kind of accelerate things from this point?
Yeah, I think this is the most important trade deadline and offseason of his entire tenure. I think the pressure's on Troy, and although we can look at some things and like a lot of the moves he's made, and I always bring this up, you like Asar, yes. You like Cade, yes. You like Jalen Duren, yes. And there's more yeses than nos. So I think credit to Troy Weaver for that. The problem, though, and I've been saying this, and I want Rod's thoughts on this, I think just patience, and I get last season with Cade being out, but the patience, and I know it's not just Troy, and that's a whole nother conversation, what's going on in the Pistons front office. I think it's dysfunctional, how it's being run. It's not just Troy, but that's another conversation. I think the patience of Troy Weaver, and not just Troy, but the front office and Tom Gores, it could come back. I don't want to say it officially. It could come back to bite Troy in the ass. I do believe that. And this team, we expected improvement. We did. I just think we overrated the roster a little bit. I think a lot of fans did. I think that's very fair. Although we had conversations and we said 30 wins at best, and people took it. I mean, Lindsey Hunter was freaking saying 6 seed. And I love Lindsey. But he said 6 seed with no additions, Rod. He said no additions, 6 seed. So, when you have injuries like they've dealt with, like Rod put earlier, the room for error, it's marginal. Like the turnovers, injuries, it's hard to stay afloat already. But when you have guys missing and guys like an Ivy expected him to have a big second year, the minutes and him coming off the bench, the storyline there, you got Duren missing a while there. It is frustrating. And the problem for Troy, and this is how you should look at this roster, Cade Cunningham, franchise player. He's not LeBron. Not everyone can be LeBron, where you put a franchise on your back and take them to the finals. We understand that. But he's a good player. Besides that, though, that's the problem. Is who's his running mate? Who's his co-star? Mm-hmm. Like right now, it's Bojan at the age of 34 who can't stop a nosebleed. And I like Bojan, but he should be a trade piece. So I think the deadline in this offseason, Brandon and Rod, most important 2 phases of Troy Weaver's tenure. And that's how you get fans not to completely buy in, but to at least get them looking and being like, okay, we see you at least trying. They got to bring in talent, and they got to bring in a guy that, again, defenses every night. No, Cade Cunningham. He's the guy, like you just mentioned, how they defend him in the pick and roll. Like, yeah, they're going to defend him like that because clearly it's Cade or bust for the most part.
Yeah,
you have to bring in somebody that can kind of alleviate some of that pressure, and I think that's Troy's number one job this trade deadline. Well, not just Troy apparently, but Troy being the main decider. Number one decision for him in the trade deadline in the offseason. Got to bring in somebody, man. Got to bring in somebody. Need another 20-point scorer. They do. On the wing, preferably.
Yep. And I bring it up just because I know a lot of fans are in this mode of fire Troy Weaver. But based off the comments that Tom Gores made, Troy Weaver is going to get the opportunity to make some changes. And that's what the questions are going to be based around. We have to talk about the reality of what this team is going to do and what they're going to be. Me personally, when this team was in the aspect of young talent acquisition, yes, I trusted Troy with that. Aside from the first draft, which we've covered aptly, it looked like it was going to be decent to good at first. And now it's one where all of those players could find themselves off this roster. But after that, from the Cades to the Durens to the Ivies to the Asar Thompsons to even Marcus Sasser, I thought that those were really, really, really good draft picks. Now, the part where he struggled, I get that they haven't made their splash yet, but the part where they've struggled is really trying to augment kind of the incremental moves to help this team be able to take some incremental steps forward where we can look at them and say, okay, we know that they're not a playoff team, but they're not also losing 27 games in a row.
Right.
You know, and Rod, I definitely want to be able to get your thoughts on it as well, because I don't want to speak on the same. We can sit up here all day and say, oh, Troy should be fired, or oh, Troy should get the opportunity. The reality is right now, Troy is going to get the opportunity to move this team forward. That's what the owner of the team said.
And Rod, everyone's telling me that Isaiah Stewart stinks, but apparently all these contenders want him. How does that make sense, Rod? I don't understand.
Well, let's go piece by piece here, because I mean, you guys brought up several good points that I want to try to hit on. One is with Troy, we've always looked at his trades in a vacuum and said, this is a good trade, this is a good draft pick, this makes sense. But now it's putting all of that stuff together.
Right.
You can have all of the best ingredients, but you can make a horrible dinner out of it if you don't, if it doesn't mesh well together. And that's what we're seeing is this doesn't fit. Something just ain't right about this.
So you say he can shop, but he might not be the best chef right now.
You can go to Whole Foods and get the best stuff that you want to. But if it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter what you got. You could have gotten it from the dollar store or Aldi or wherever. It didn't matter. But here's the thing. Troy has always made trades on his accord, on his terms. He's gotten the people that he's wanted, the contracts that he's wanted, and he's been able to cut people and shape this roster any way that he's wanted to. Moving forward, he doesn't have that liberty anymore. He's going to have to go and get people that make a difference, period. Right. He hasn't had to when he had 4 or 5 centers and people were joking about it nationally. He can't do that anymore because it's got to be impact players for every deal here moving forward.
Yeah. And
that's a tougher situation to call somebody and say, I need an impact player from you, and they know they have you. You can't make the ridiculous demands, and you can't win trades that way when you're picking up the phone and you're saying, here's what I need from you. That is a tough position to be in for anybody. If you're Danny Ainge or if you're anybody, Bob Myers, it didn't matter who, you can't do that and fleece people. It's really, really tough to do that. So that's the challenge here. And Brandon, we said this in the offseason. What was the biggest issue with this team and what was going to determine their success? We said the chemistry and how they deal with Monty was going to be the number one thing. They can win 30 games or they can just not do well because the chemistry doesn't work, but everything depended on that. We were not worried about Cade and coming back from the injury. We weren't worried about that one bit. We said the number one thing was the chemistry. And we're seeing with flawed chemistry, you're going to get flawed results. Absolutely. Man, from a fan perspective, they have every right to be frustrated and to say, sell the team, sell the team, sell the team. We've seen it with the Lions in the past, and we see these things turn around at whatever point when things get right. To say Troy isn't that guy is it's a leap for me. I think he is that guy. I think he knows what he needs, but he's gotten this roster to this point. And we talked about this before. His biggest asset was cap space. And what are you doing with cap space right now? It is an asset, But right now it's a liability because you can't go out and use it effectively because nobody wants to trade with you. Nobody's going to give you something to get you out of the cellar that you're in. And now you have less capital because that cap space doesn't mean quite as much because you have to get an impactful player who's an under the radar impactful player. There might be 2 or 3 that are out there on the market, but you might have to overpay for a Zach LaVine or a DeMar DeRozan or somebody like that. And we went through teams who might be willing to trade. I saw something with Lauri Markkanen. I'm like, hey, we just said that the other day. We just said Lauri Markkanen. So, or John Collins. Do you want to take a risk? Because now your impactful players are risks. There are only a handful of teams who are out of it who will pick up the phone and when you call and say, hey, I'm willing to, hey, we're in it. Y'all not. That's on y'all. So that is where Troy is right now in having to make a deal. The draft can't save him right now because there is no. So this is just a preponderance of things. It's falling to 5 and having to take a SAR. It is not getting Vic. All of those things would have changed this and made this not even a conversation piece right now. So some of it is just dumb luck, but the fans who were saying sell the team from a Tom Gores perspective, and I've said this before, that is the type of owner that you want. We need a top tier coach. Here's a check. Here's a blank check. Go get the top tier coach you want. You need somebody in free agency. Here's a check. And he's not going to meddle in the day-to-day stuff. People seem to want a Mark Cuban who's going to be there at the arena every day and yelling from the side. You don't want that. You really don't want that. The Fords weren't like that.
And Cuban is kind of one of one too.
Right. I mean, but that's that. And then the Clippers owner too. He can be there. And we've seen Matt Ishbia at Pistons games too. But he's not a guy who's there and who's yelling and trying to be the GM, the Jerry Jones type person. You don't want that. I don't want that type of owner. I'll say it that way. People say they want an involved owner who cares. Sheila Ford-Hamp is not an involved owner who's at games and going into practices and saying, trade that dude, bring me this dude. He's not that. So if Tom Gores isn't that, but he gives you all the resources, I think that's the best type of owner. Unseen, but gives you everything that you need. I don't know what people want more than that. And I'm not saying that he's blameless either. He's allowed some things to go on over the course of the years but it's his team. What do you people think they can control team owners and they can't. Even you shouting, sell the team, he hears it, but he's a competitor. He wants to win just as much as you do. Yep. So I get the fans sort of anger about it, but for me, it is it's a lot of different things. And the team is accountable. Gores is accountable. Troy is accountable. Everybody's accountable. But how do you fix that thing? I don't have a good answer for you to say, here's the magic wand that you just wave and all of this goes away.
Right. Yeah. And really quickly, I want to give, I'm so happy Rod said that because I said, you were there. I said the same thing. I want personally for me, what owner I like for my franchise, cut a check,
CTC,
shut up. Those are 2 things I love from an owner. I know people have different preferences, but if you're willing to spend money, which Tom is, and you don't get involved, I think people like it. And I'm glad you brought up the Mark Cuban thing because, guys, there's one Mark Cuban. Like, let's be realistic here. Like, they're not going to control what an owner does. And I'm with you. He's not absolved from blame. You can look at, of course, it starts from the top down. If there's some dysfunction, there's things you're frustrated with. Of course, you look at Tom, but I'm 100% with you. Now, in some instances, some dysfunction can be covered up by great players. Like you look at the Lakers, you look at their front office, you look how they're run. LeBron walked right in there. We don't talk about the owner anymore because we know they have LeBron James. No, LeBron is not coming. No player like that's coming here. But I'm with you, Rod. I'm so glad you said that because I think when people get frustrated and they have every right to be, they look at owner. Sell the team. Instead of looking at what's the actual problem here, what can be fixed, because that's not even an option. You're just wasting your breath. I think that's just, it's like when you're really upset at somebody and you start taking some personal shots and you're like, I'm so angry, I'm going to try and get you. That's like the fans' way of doing that. It's like, I'm so pissed off. I don't know who to blame. Let's just look at Tom Gores. And for me, at least, if Tom's willing to spend money to get the best available coach, I appreciate that. Like I do. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think you nailed it, Rod. And I'm glad you said it because now it makes me feel.
And let me say this too. This goes back. Let's rewind this a couple of years when people said, tear this thing down to the studs. That was the fan sentiment on
yes.
They said
trade everybody, start completely over.
We'll watch losing with young players.
Right. But Troy did that. And it was sort of, okay, now what? Who are these guys? And you get the number one pick. So it follows the path of what you want a rebuild to look like. You get a franchise player that you can build around. But what fans don't get is this isn't linear. This isn't going to happen all, and it doesn't succeed every time too, is the piece of this. Look at the process Sixers. They lost over the course of years and years. They have a name for that. We haven't even come up with a name for this Pistons futility that we're going through right now, but that was very clearly the process. So it doesn't always yield you a championship or even star players. Yes, they got Joel Embiid, but they also got Markelle Fultz, and they got completely fleeced out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you need good leadership, you need good front office, but you also need some dumb luck and some things to go your way. And the Pistons are not having very much of that. Fans are not wrong. I'm not saying they're wrong.
Right.
But logically, you have to understand sometimes when you get what you ask for, a complete rebuild, it's not pretty. And this is what I said when people were asking for a rebuild. I don't know if y'all know what this looks like, because it's going to take a few years and it could get real ugly. And people thought 17 wins was real ugly. This is the real ugly. And this isn't a 2-win, 27 in a row lost team, but circumstances have sort of put you in there. And that's where you are. Yeah. So you can come out of this, but it is also, this is the ugly.
I want to say this too, because I already know what people are going to say watching this, and I want to answer the question. They're going to say, well, what about Houston? What about Orlando? And I want to bring it up because you nailed it, comparing it, going back to the process. Orlando, and you need a little bit of luck in these things. Like you brought up Victor. You need some luck. Like that helps, of course. The Orlando Magic were able to get Paolo Banchero, hit on Franz Wagner. They have the good collection of young players, a Cole Anthony. Speaking of Markelle Fultz, they have a good collection of guys mixed in with some veterans. It's a well-constructed roster. Then you have Houston, who spent money. They got a Fred VanVleet. They went out and got a Dylan Brooks. They got Ime Udoka. They hit Sengun is going to be an all-star player. And then they have their Jalen Greens. They're of course their Jabari Smith Juniors. But you need some luck with these things. And to your point about the money, that's one of the biggest things for any franchise. It's a weapon to have when you have a lot of money available. And the Pistons just haven't found a way to spend it yet. They're not where the Rockets are. Now, if people are pissed about that, okay, then be frustrated. But I think people leave out that context when they say, well, Rod, what about the Magic? What about the Rockets? Those guys have made jumps. What about the Thunder and their 1,000, 1,500 draft picks? So I just think that stuff kind of gets left out, how these teams got there versus the Pistons. I mean, Paolo Banchero walked onto the scene and he's already going to be an all-star. So like there's some context there, but they've hit on multiple draft picks and spent money and constructed a nice roster. Pistons are still figuring this thing out, which is frustrating, but it's the truth.
So here's the other thing that people are picking on. And I've seen this tweet from, I think, 2021 a few times. I tweeted, hey, the Pistons outgoing message should be no, SGA and the number 5 pick is not enough to trade for Cade Cunningham. And that's when the Pistons had the pick before the Cade draft. So it is, this is a take that didn't stand the test of time. But at the time, your SGA wasn't what he is now,
right?
All-star, all-NBA type player.
Right.
And if you end up with Franz Wagner in that, so you have SGA and Franz or you have Cade, obviously, in hindsight, people would say, hey, I take SGA and Franz. But in the moment when the Pistons needed a franchise player with that number 1 pick, was SGA a franchise projecting to be a franchise leader type player? So we can play this hindsight 2020, go back and look at old tweets game. We can play that all day, every day. How many other people missed out on SGA?
Right.
So every time somebody wants to say the Pistons missed this draft pick, the Pistons missed out on Giannis by doing something else. Well, there are 12 or 13 other teams that missed out on Giannis too. It's not a perfect science. You're not going to get it right every time. So, yes, it's going to happen that way. You're not going to get every draft pick 100% right. That's just not how drafts work. Nobody does that.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up as well. It's like, look, I don't have a problem going through and saying what Troy got right, what Troy got wrong. But the reality of it is they spent a few years to try and get the young talent in here after the first draft. And people talk about Orlando. They talk about some of these other squads like Houston. The specifics about those two like rebuilds and where they are now, people are like, well, why can't we have a jump like that? You go and you look at Orlando's team. Detroit Pistons have 8 players on rookie contract deals that they are depending on right now. Orlando was able to jumpstart their rebuild by trading Aaron Gordon and trading Vooch, and they brought in players like Wendell Carter. They brought in players like Gary Harris. You're talking about a little bit older players who know the NBA game, can play a little bit of defense, and it's not just those guys. When you look at their roster, they're an older team than the Pistons.
Yeah, they got Joe Ingles now.
Yeah, they're an older team than the Pistons. Now, Paolo is that guy. Franz is a really, 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 really good player.
Yep.
Really good player. But what they have around them is just a little bit older, a little bit more mature, a little bit more knowledgeable basketball players and teammates on their squad. When you look at the Houston Rockets as well, they went from just as trash as what the Pistons were looking like to adding a couple players that realistically, Rob, we sat here and we talked about it. We talked about Devin Booker. We talked about Fred VanVleet. We said, hey, you know what? We'd add them for the right deal. You know, we wouldn't break the bank for Dylan Brooks, especially not at that point in time in the rebuild. But we did say he would add to what this Pistons team needed. And a lot of fans out there scoffed at that type of stuff. You know, even us at a certain price point scoffed at it. But when you add 2 rotation players, what did it do? It blocked some of their young players from being able to get the time. It stopped some of their development. People are complaining about Jalen Green. They're complaining about Cam Whitmore being in a G League and such. Troy Weaver said he made a decided decision to not bring in those types of players at this juncture because he did not want to block some of those young players. In hindsight, it might have been good to be able to bring in a couple of those types of players, but when you're looking at, we're getting Bojan back. We do have Monte Morris here. We have Cade coming back healthy. We do have Stewart here who's going to be a little bit older. I do believe that, like we all said, maybe there was a slight or major or mid overestimation of what this roster could be. But looking at those two, Houston and the Magic, it's clear to see that their roster construction is just a little bit better, a little bit more mature than what the Pistons have right now. The Pistons made a decided effort to say, you know what? We're going to kick this thing kind of down the road one more year before we do what the Houston Rockets did. And if the Houston Rockets, if they didn't have the turnaround that they did, I think that we would have less of a precipice or a platform to say, you know what, we believe that the Pistons can do this as well.
Right.
Because those weren't 2 world beater picks, man. No. Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet, they added a lot to the Houston Rockets team in terms of veteran presence, knowing how to win, knowing how to stabilize things down the stretch. But it's not like they went out there and they actually made the splashes, you know. And so from that perspective, from having to deal with the fact that we know Troy Weaver has to go out here and make something happen, I do have a little bit more faith that he can do at least something along those lines and be able to get some players in here over the course of the deadline, the draft, because I do believe that they're going to have to get busy in the trade market during the draft as well, when a little bit of cap flexibility across the league is a little bit better for right before free agency settles in. And then obviously free agency, where I believe that they're going to have to go out there and cash out and overpay on somebody. Like, I know obviously fans out there, I'm seeing it in some of these group chats, they're saying go out there and give OG whatever he wants.
Yeah, but just to play hold on, I want to play devil's advocate there, Rod, because I want to ask you, because people ask me if I tell them, well, this offseason they have money, we give them the same old spiel. Well, they'll say, Jeff, who's saving this franchise? And I would say, well, a lot of it would, in my opinion, would dictate on who takes a jump next year. Like, that also matters with your young core. But even if they do, let's just say hypothetically, Rod, they sign an OG Anunoby. How much of an impact does he make? I know he wouldn't be the only signing, but someone like that. Come on, like
I'm not an OG guy. That's just 15 points a game, 37% from three. The defense is there, but that's not a put you over the edge guy.
No,
for me. So it's OG and somebody else.
Right.
But and I'm more focused on who the somebody else is before we get there. And he's on a 18.6 this year and 19.9 next year. That's not terrible. Would you rather have OG or Cam Whitmore? Not Cam Whitmore, OG or Cam Johnson?
For the money that I believe OG is going to command if he came to the Pistons, then
what's Cam making annually?
I think it's about 24, 25 a year.
So if you got Cam Johnson at 24-25 or OG at what would be his asking price?
I feel like
high 30s.
I think some high 30s to 40s. I really do. For if the Pistons were going to sign him, just like if the Pistons were going to sign Cam, I felt like it was going to take upwards of like 30. But he's obviously going to be cheaper. The other name that comes to mind when you just kind of read off those stats is what's John Collins making? Because he's going to be making about 20 a year.
We just looked up John Collins. I think he was 20 or 30. Let me
I wouldn't mind John at 20 if he's making 20 per.
Yeah, if he's making 20, I'm almost like maybe you had your bet with a John Collins. I don't know what it would take. I know
25 escalating up to 26.5.
Ooh, man.
That's not too bad. I mean,
he's got 2 more years left. He's got a player option on that last year.
The reason why I'm interested in now, I don't know if high 30s. There's going to be a lot of teams interested in him, so you're going to have to overpay for him. He can defend at a high level.
You talking OG?
Yes, he could. If he's close to a 40% 3-point shooter, I don't know what he would look like with more volume. Because Rod could be right. He could just be if on a championship team, he might just forever be a third option. He's not pushing you over the top at close to $40 million. So
that's steep.
So if we're talking Cam versus OG, you lose some of that defensive ability, but Cam can still shoot the ball. He's still 6'8". And you're paying him $10 less million. How do you really argue with that?
Yeah. OG or Dylan Brooks. And what's Dylan Brooks making? Dylan Brooks is making 22.
Oh, see now, Rod, why do you got to do this?
Goodness.
Now you're making this interesting. Now
these are the decisions. So if you said you wanted to get, is Dylan Brooks worth 22? Maybe. To somebody. Is OG worth 30 whatever to a contender or somebody who has that bread to do it? To the Pistons, neither is worth that.
Right.
Because you need something else before you get there. If they're not the guy to take you over, you need an all-star right now.
Yeah.
Right.
You need an all-star. Yeah. Dylan Brooks is not an all-star. OG is not an all-star right now. You
need a co-star next to Cade. You need that.
You
do. You and Jeff, I made this point a couple of times. What did Cade do at Oklahoma State with that roster he had?
Mm-hmm.
The best he could, because he didn't have another 1A type guy.
Right.
And that's what he's facing right now. Is there's no guy there, no all-star there that makes Cade better.
Mm-hmm.
Cade can go out and score 37.5, and now we see that. But if there's not, when Cade goes to the bench, what do you have?
Mm-hmm.
You're losing leads at that point. Because when did that lead really just kind of die? Second quarter. So you need somebody to hold the fort while Cade is on the bench, and then when they're together, they got to be the freaking Wonder Twins. They got to go out there and put up some buckets. And that's the problem with this team right now, is they don't have that talent level where you've got 3 guys. Because we were looking for Jaden Ivey to be a number 2 guy. He's not there yet. We're looking for Bogey to be Bogey of last year. We're looking for all of this stuff to seamlessly kind of go together, and it's not.
Yeah.
So how do you What do you do when you recognize that? You can't go make a silly trade.
Right.
You've just got to do the best with what you've got. And Jalen Duren hasn't been healthy enough to kind of be consistent enough to give you that. And people who want to say Isaiah Stewart is bad. He's what he is because he has to be a higher tier player on this team. If he goes to Boston or he goes to a contender, he can hide in the weeds and just be a contributor.
Right.
But the Pistons need him to be so much more.
Right.
But they're doing that at a bargain price. Is he a horrible player? No. Is he a good contributor to a good team? Yes. Is this a good team right now? No. So that's where your issue is they want to say he got overpaid. Do you know how many people are overpaid? When you judge the market as Isaiah Stewart and overpay,
he's paid like a backup big.
Yeah.
The San Antonio Spurs just paid their backup big, like $1-2 million more a year than Stewart.
Just look at the contracts though. Like we just talked about OG making close to 40. What was Blake making his final years in Detroit? And that was an all-star. 37? That was an all-star player that took a team by himself to the playoffs. Like
all NBA. He was all NBA.
All
that's
NBA.
How good. That's how good Blake was that year. And people screamed about the contract. The contract is a contract. But that was the last time they went out and said, we need an all-star. Everything else be damned. We just need an all-star.
Right.
And so they can't make that same mistake and that was the whole problem, to unravel that ball of yarn, to get out of those contracts. But you can't jump back in and do the same thing all over again. And that's with
a potentially lesser player.
That's why this is a dangerous time for the front office and for Troy, because you're desperate and you need to do something because you hear what the fans are yelling. So you have to do something, but you can't go and make the same Blake mistake that they did last time. And whether you call that a mistake or not, that's an all NBA year. When was the last time a Piston had an all NBA year?
I'll tell you what, Rod, he made it exciting. He put butts in the seats.
Ironically, it was Drummond, all NBA third team before him.
Yeah. That's how that works.
Well, you're right. You got that. So that is where we are right now. That is the next step in this thing, because I don't think you can wait until the offseason to do anything. I think you've got to do something at the deadline, even if it's just cosmetic. You got to do something. You got to get off of some of these contracts and bring somebody in. And if you're going to do that, just go get an all-star caliber player. Just everything else be damned. At this point, I'm that frustrated as a person who kind of casually watches the Pistons now that it's not a good watch. It's just not.
Yeah. No, it's not. And then, you know what it sounds like from everything Rod just said, and I think from what we all agree what Cade needs, we talk about what would be the best fit next to him. You're talking about a guy who's a pure scorer, preferably a 2-guard or a wing, someone obviously that can defend would be preferred, but purely a scorer. And you could stagger him in Cade's minutes, to Rod's point, where if Cade leaves the game, you could get someone in there that can hold down the fort, like Rod said. You know what that sounds a lot like? And I don't know if this will get done, but if you're talking about guys that could be available that would fit that, sounds like a Zach LaVine.
Hey, I knew it. I was waiting for him to say it.
The name rhymes with Mac Beline. You would have to pay through the nose to get Zach LaVine. And I don't know if you have enough. I don't know if you have enough to do it. And I don't know if Chicago would trade him. But how long have I been saying Zach LaVine, Brandon?
Yeah.
I feel like you've been saying Zach LaVine since I've last got on this podcast. I feel like you've been harping on Zach LaVine for the Ryan Windhorse.
I feel like if the Pistons, the reason why this trade deadline is so pivotal is that this is the time right now, before you get to the free agency and contracts are kind of, the 1 years are over and the 2 years are going into 1 year and the cap space isn't locked in during the draft. Right now is when you can take advantage of a team that is desperate or a team looking to try and get a jump on things and say, you know what? We need a star. We will take your junk for that star as well. That's where I believe the Pistons can go. Obviously, I feel like a young player too might get caught up in the trade winds, but I really, really, really believe that Troy needs to stress, just like how they were able to kind of acquire Alec Burks and Jalen Duren by taking on like 4 or 5 other of the New York Knicks junk because they really wanted to be players in the free agency market to get Jalen Brunson. I think this is a time for them to go out there, Find a team that's desperate to say, you know what, we need to make a change. And it might be Utah. Utah just kind of got swindled by Cleveland, in my opinion.
Yeah,
they got swindled, and now they're in a position to where I don't know how long they want to be down bad. You're hearing Lauri Markkanen and John Collins and these names come up in trade rumors or being on the block. A team like that, man, I feel like they need to go. They need to figure out, hey, how much cap space do you guys need for this upcoming free agency? And they need to make something work some way to be able to bring in a John Collins, or if you can do what you need to do to get a Lauri Markkanen and just make it happen. Like, price be darned. Like, I don't. Those are two players, at least in my opinion. I don't think that John Collins would take nearly as much as Lauri. I think if you can make that happen, make it happen. He's probably going to take that player, not take that player option. I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know which way he leans. I think it's more or less how the Pistons are looking. But with the Lauri Markkanen, I almost feel like the Pistons aren't in a position. They're not in a position to not call and say, hey, what do you need to make this happen?
Well, to Rod's point too, at least Utah, Danny Ainge, he has the talent that teams are going to call him for. Despite the situation they're in, he still can sit back, relax, have a margarita. Someone's going to call about Lauri Markkanen.
All the deals.
Someone's going to call about John Collins. Like, to Rod's point, trading does get easier when you start with the leverage. Like, he has the leverage already.
Yeah, but the point of waiting until free agency is you still have to convince at that point, whoever you're going after has to say, this is a roster that I want to go to, that I can immediately.
Right. A situation I can thrive.
And so you need something now to make this roster look a little bit prettier.
That's true.
For that person to say, hey, I'm willing to go there because I can be that guy. Now, if you can get Fred VanVleet to go to Houston, and we kind of scoffed at the dysfunction that Houston has, but would Pistons fans trade places with Houston right now? Absolutely,
they would. Yeah, and
it's taking the risk that Houston did to push in and say, hey, Dylan Brooks, good player, a lot of baggage that he's bringing with him. Fred VanVleet, solid guy, solid player who's going to be able to do a lot of things for us. If that's the right pairing of vets and sort of attitude and spunk, then this thing can work out. And it's worked out. So Troy hasn't taken the gambles because he's kind of hoarded that cap space. But now what is cap space doing for you is the problem with that strategy. Cap space is doing nothing for you, and you have a 27-game losing streak that you're looking at. That's where we are.
Yeah, because I think that opposing teams that they will call up to trade with, cap space is attractive. But with a weaker free agency market, how many people are trying to free up cap space?
Right.
I think most teams, when we call up, they're going to be looking at the young players that we probably don't want to trade. We call up and we say, hey, what's up with Lauri Markkanen? Utah might say, what's up with Jalen Duren? And that's not a position that the Pistons can be in unless they know that they're getting back something surefire, all-star quality.
And that's why Ivy would have to, if you're going and getting an all-star, wouldn't Ivy have to be in that deal, Rod?
Almost feels
so
like.
Let me rewind this with you, Jeff. Who are your untouchables on this roster?
Hey,
I would say there's only, to me, two. Cade and Duren. Because I like Duren a lot, but technically one, if you want to be real, Rod. If we're being real, it's one. But I like Duren, I like Asar, but technically I would, if you want to say for certain, it would be one. It would be Cade Cunningham.
So who's the third? If you had to say there was a third, who's the third?
I would say I like Asar a lot as a defender. So I would put Asar there, but I really, if confidently, I'd say two. I don't know if I'd go three. And you just drafted Asar, but I don't think he's an untouchable. I think that's to say someone's untouchable.
Right. So my point in that is if somebody said, hey, throw Asar in there.
Yeah.
Then you could do it. For me, I'm in the same spot. You have to show me what the deal is. But in general, I would say no on Asar too. But if you're giving me an all-star, if it's a Zach LaVine trade and they want Asar, come on, let's go. Where's the paperwork?
Yeah.
Let's get the league on the other line to confirm this, and let's go. If it has to be Asar at that point. That's why I think this is desperation time, and it's a dangerous time because you can get duped into something that doesn't work. And the problem is, just like you mentioned, the Knicks trades, you're taking bad contracts right now. You have to. You're going to take a bad contract and maybe two because you have that space. So the asset of that is, you might get the guy you want, but you're also going to get a couple of guys you do not want. And those contracts have to be, you might have to eat another year of doing that. So it's the crossroads that you're at, is you're going to eat some contracts. You're going to, in order for that player to be really good, you're going to have to go through some muck in order to get there.
Whew, man, this was a full plate today. I know that you guys are chefs. You guys know how to cook up the ingredients. We just got to hope that Troy can now, man.
It's a full, I don't even think this is just a Troy thing. I think this is a Goris thing now. I don't think Goris is going to say, hey, hands off, Troy, go do what you need to do and let me know what you need. I think Goris is going to be as involved as ever in anything that goes forward in this, because I think they have a specific direction of from the fans, from just kind of general sentiment of what they have to do.
And from Goris, he wants to see this team win. He spoke on it too.
Yeah, it's just you got to be real careful with this, and I will keep harping on that point, or you will end up in another Blake Griffin situation with a player not as good as Blake Griffin. That you could, this whole Troy Weaver tenure has been about writing the books and getting out of that. And if you jump right back into that, you can do things to make the fan base happy and just hamstring you for the next couple of years. And so we just came out of Miguel Cabrera and his really big contract, because that's what, you can't get rid of Miguel Cabrera.
Right.
And that's sort of doing that for the fans and for the continuity of the team. And that might be something that you have to do here, is just to calm things down. You might have to take some bad contracts and get into some bad spots. That's where we are.
Sheesh, any last word from you, Jeff?
No, I had fun. I had fun. You mentioned how me and Rod can cook. I don't know, Rod. I think Rod shops over at Whole Foods. I shop at Meijer, so I think his ingredients might be a little better than mine. But regardless, hey, I'm just happy to be here. I love you guys. We gotta go. We gotta get some food soon, man. I miss our dinners, but I'm happy I'm here. Rod, thank you for waiting for me too, man. I know you got a busy.
No, just it's good to have you back. That third voice is always good to bounce off of, and we definitely include you in everything that we're doing, but good to have you back in person. Water Bottle Jeff will get his co-star role back.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that. I'm more Fiji, if I'm being real with you. I need some Fiji. I think the essential isn't good enough, but regardless, hey,
on brand, completely on brand.
I'm showing up with Fiji water bottle next week, man. Oh man, well look, this is fun. Guys, man, this was fun. This was definitely a treat for me, man. I love these dudes, man. It's and I like the conversation, man. I like the talk. Obviously, from where things started to where things are with the Pistons, it's one that we hope to see, and we should see some change very, very soon. Hopefully, like Rod is saying, we don't find ourselves in a situation where they go and make a Blake type of a deal for a player that's going to add a little bit less than what Blake was and tie up the books all over again, because, man, you can't do that. I'm hoping that if they make any type of a move or moves, that it allows them to be able to bring somebody in that can absolutely be that type of gunner next to Cade Cunningham and still protect their ability to go out into the free agency and then maybe add those type of incremental pieces. But this is one of the most interesting times in Detroit Pistons like last 15 years, like all of the different scenarios, how pivotal it is. This, sheesh, man, it's a lot. It's a lot on the plate right now. Hopefully Troy knows how to put it together. Otherwise, the fans are going to make sure that everybody hears about it.
No question.
Yep. So absolutely.
All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up, man. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Woodward Pistons podcast on the Woodward Sports Network. I'm your boy, Brandon Dent, Detroit Kool-Aid. Got Hollywood over here, Mr. Jeff Iafrate. Make sure you guys tap into the Morning Woodward Show, 8 to 10, Monday through Friday. He's doing great work there. Really great work alongside his host, Sam, Flannel Sam. And I love what you guys do, man.
My guy.
I do.
Appreciate you.
Definitely, brother. And you guys make sure you always tap in and tune in to Detroit News Rod
How do you
Beard.
not?
Hey, come on, make sure you do it, and make sure you keep looking out for our guy Mike Curtis as well, Detroit Pistons beat writer for the Detroit News as well. He's going to be jumping on the pod here, I think, in a couple weeks to give us his thoughts on how everything is going. But let's get this drum roll on the way out for the legend here, man. Hey, yo, shout out to the legend Detroit News Rod Beard, brother. As always, thank you, man, and have a blessed rest of your day. You guys too.
Deuces.
Peace.